Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I hope that you are well and that wedding planning is going super smoothly for you all. Today I'm chatting to the lovely Siobhan Craven-Robin, who has over 20 years of experience in the wedding industry. So naturally, Siobhan has a plethora of knowledge and tips that she's going to share with us today, and we're going to be discussing the topic of how to create and not simply plan your perfect wedding. There is a difference. Siobhan is going to explain it to us, so stay tuned and find out about how to make your wedding super individual to you and have the day of your dreams. Enjoy this episode and I will be back very soon. Good morning, Siobhan. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Tell the listeners who you are and what you do.
I'm Siobhan Craven-Robin. I'm a wedding planner going into my 23rd year of wedding planning, based here in London. And I also am a director of the National Association of Wedding Professionals, and I also lecture for the Event School London.
Fantastic. So you've got a font of all knowledge in front of me, so lots of useful information coming.
Well, 23 years of it.
23 years worth of information coming, condensed into a nice little short podcast.
Hopefully.
So, fantastic. So Siobhan, tell us about your roles, plural, and your experience in the industry, how you came in and your journey to this point.
Well, when I started my business in 1996, I was actually the first wedding planner in the UK. There wasn't anybody who solely planned weddings. It would be catering companies or production companies who would do elements of a wedding, but not the whole thing. So I really wasn't too sure if I'd had a brilliant idea that nobody had thought of, or a really bad idea that maybe 100 people had tried before me and it hadn't worked. And obviously it wasn't just starting a new business. That's what was different about it. It was a new idea, so I wasn't going into a ready-made marketplace. So I did about 8 months of market research, and when I say that, it literally was just going to wedding fairs, standing, talking to couples, asking what they found difficult in planning their wedding, maybe how much they'd be prepared to pay for somebody to help, etc. And then after 8 months, and also getting to know the industry, getting to know different suppliers. My background was sort of loosely in the event industry, so it wasn't a huge leap for me. And then getting together the suppliers that I wanted to work with. And then after 8 months launched, and when I say launched, it was a little classified ad. I think it was a 3x2 in the back of Brides and You and Your Wedding, and that's what brought you business back in those days.
Absolutely.
That's how I started. In terms of the other roles, the National Association of Wedding Professionals, we started up just over 5 years ago now, and there's 4 of us who head that up, and it really was. As wedding planners, obviously we deal with all different suppliers, so we got to hear how people were feeling about the industry. There were a lot of changes post-recession in 2009, not necessarily for the good. And it was really through a need of something being needed in the industry that recognised professionalism, but also celebrated it for what it was. And what people bring to it. You know, it's awry with artisans, entrepreneurs who have a creative skill like yourself, Ross, and have made it into a business. So that was why we started up NAWP, and we're going into our 6th year now. And then my lecturing for the event school, I'd done that for some years just as a guest lecturer, but for the last 2 years, I teach 3 courses a year now for them, to people wanting to get into wedding planning. And it's hugely rewarding. I feel it's like giving something back as well.
Absolutely.
And I love following their progress.
Yeah, and it must be great for them to have somebody who's still in the industry doing it, not just teaching the theory.
I think that really does make a difference. That's a good point, and certainly that's what they always say as well, is that I'm always able to talk about everything from experience. Whatever I'm telling them isn't from a textbook, it's from something that I've learnt. And similarly, I've always got weddings on the go. I only do about 3 or 4 weddings a year now, but I'm still in the industry. I think it's important, both as a lecturer and a director of NAWP, that I still sort of am immersed in the industry and have my finger on the pulse, to use a cliche.
You've got those real world examples that people can relate to and probably respect you a little bit more because of. Absolutely. So you're going to help me talk today about creating a wedding as opposed to simply planning a wedding. Would you like to help explain what we mean, the difference between the two terms, perhaps?
Yeah, I think, again, to use another sort of cliche, my USP is that with all my clients, and right from day one, I've always created something for them. I never work to a template. I would find that tedious and boring. It's very much taking on who that couple want, and I would say that for the most part, my clients are people who want something a little bit different. I don't mean getting married underwater or anything like that, but they don't want it to be something that they sort of see everywhere in magazines or on blogs, etc. And so I think that in creating a wedding, it is about your personality, and it seems patently obvious saying that, but it's just to sit back and think about what you enjoy doing, what you enjoy together, what you like doing with your friends. So what sort of an occasion do you want to create? And I think that's, well, I don't think I know, it's one of the great things, that I look back over 23 years, is there's just more and more choice now for couples.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's a great thing,
yes.
Whether it's from how you want to get married in terms of your ceremony, to where you want to have your reception, to how you want to celebrate it. And so you really can create something that is unique to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great thing about the industry now, and that's what couples should look at, that you don't have to be dictated by any kind of framework or template. It's look to yourself and what you'd want to create, and then you can start building it from there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of the problem is there's a lot of professionals in the industry that still feel that they have to work within a certain template, so they sort of putting their restrictions onto couples as well. Have you found that?
It can be. It's interesting you saying that, actually, Ross, because when I think back to when I started, there wasn't a lot of imagination in the industry. And actually, one person I particularly remember, and he's a photographer I still work with to this day, and I saw him at the National Wedding Show, which was the only wedding show back in the day then, and loved his photography, but it was very much, the leatherback book with the brass edging and the
yes.
post shots, and the photographer, you'd mock up your cake shot and then the photographer would hot foot it home. And I remember saying to him about, well, maybe we could just do different sort of shots, more relaxed ones, and maybe you'd stay longer and catch more of the action, which of course now we know as reportage.
Yes.
And he thought this was a great idea, but obviously it was also about what couples would be prepared to pay for a nicer album, for a photographer staying longer. So it was also moving it out of that price bracket that it was at the time, and getting people to realise the value of paying that little bit more for that. So obviously it worked, but I think that's a good example of sometimes how, and I think it would happen less so now, that people work within certain parameters. And I think the level of creativity in photography now, in floristry, in cakes, it almost seems infinite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's always something new, isn't there?
So I suppose the message is, if you're meeting with a supplier and they seem quite restrictive, there's probably somebody else that could help you, and you probably work with better for your wedding. I
think so. I think it's pointless trying to sort of encourage them to do something that they don't do. I mean, it's always worth asking,
yes.
Even if it's something simple, like perhaps it's a solo photographer but you want 2 people shooting the day because it's at 2 different locations or something, ask if they've got a second. But otherwise, yes, if there's something you particularly want in terms of the end product, the album, or how you want the day captured, look to photographers who do that way. It's the same with stationery. You're not going to go to a stationery company that specialises in laser cutting to get thermography done or something.
No,
you know what I mean?
It's true. Just absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. So as a wedding planner with all this experience, the industry must have changed quite a lot, but throughout that time, do couples still come to you with the same or similar problems? Is there a recurring query or issue that you need to help them address?
I think the main reasons that people will hire a wedding planner is time to plan a wedding, and it takes time. It really does. It's hundreds of hours, and it's not that they don't want to do it. It's just it can then become a headache within their, if they work long hours or they travel a lot, etc. And it makes it a less than pleasurable process. And it should be pleasurable. That's one of the things I always say. The planning should be almost as much fun as the day itself.
Yeah, it should be.
And so I'd say that's one of the main reasons, and also Generally, they're doing it for the first time, so unless they've had people get married, close friends or people in the family, where the suppliers that they've met and liked would want to use, it's a stab in the dark, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yes, you're going to meet with these various people, but there's also a lot of smoke and mirrors on the internet now, as we both know.
Yeah.
It's yes, you've really got to do your research. So again, that eats into the time, and you could probably end up looking at 10 venues and none of them being right, because the images that you saw on the internet showed it, maybe a lovely outside garden area, and you think that's perfect for me, and then you get there and it only takes 50 people and you're 120, that sort of thing. So for a wedding planner, obviously you're saving them all of that. You're taking them direct to who can do the job that they want, and also making it pleasurable. You're sort of taking all the administration away from them as such, but they're still left with all the nice bits of tasting their menu.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think that it's also a fear of not, they want to enjoy the day as well. So I think having somebody oversee it, you can just sit back.
A little bit of peace of mind, and
without question. And then I think the thing now is, just as we were talking about there being more choice, I think everything in life now seems more experiential, doesn't it? You walk into a hotel now and it has a scent. And you associate it. You never go into a 5-star hotel now that doesn't have a scent. So it's instantly evoking a memory, isn't it, or creating a feeling. Same when you go to theatre, etc. And I think that's spilled over into weddings in every way, that the nice feel of a tablecloth, the taste of the food, the sound of the music. So I'd say people that pay more attention to that now, and also wonder how they can create that without spending fortunes.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, so we've spoken a little bit about the first steps in terms of, you mentioned thinking about what you like doing with your friends and how you want your day to unfold. What would be the next point for you? So you want to create something that's really unique to you, and you've got a good taste of what you like. What would you say the next step in the process is?
They've definitely obviously got to set a budget. As boring as it sounds, it's necessary, and a realistic one. And again, that can be difficult, because if you've not done it before, how much is a cake? How much is a photographer, etc.? So again, that comes back to the sort of time spent just doing your basic research. But a budget is essential, because it's obviously going to dictate who you're looking at and how much you're allocating to each element of your wedding, and that really is critical. I would also say to all couples to have a sort of 10% thereabout sort of safety net, that it's there if they decide they want something extra, or they upgrade their champagne, or they just quite simply spend too much. It's one of those things. It's a bit like decorating your house. You're always going to say, oh, it's that much, and then you see, I don't know, some cushions that you like, or a particular lamp, and it's the same with a wedding. You're opening yourself up to a whole new world, where you're going to see lots of things that get you excited and think, gosh, I never thought of that, but I'd love to have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a budget obviously is essential, and also, again, stating the obvious, but a number of guests. Absolutely. And again, to be realistic on that, you don't have to invite plus ones if that list is getting quite big. It can be a polite thing to do, but if somebody hasn't got a long-term partner, it's not essential to do that. So a realistic guest list as well. And those are sort of the nitty-gritty things, really. After that, it's deciding what kind of ceremony you want. I think that's really essential, because that will dictate then the area that you look for a venue. So if you're having a religious ceremony, you're probably going to then marry somewhere pretty local to where you live, or you've got to get yourself on an electoral roll somewhere, parish electoral roll somewhere. If you're having a civil ceremony, they can be anywhere in terms of licensed venues, or perhaps you're really wanting to do something very different and get married in your garden or on a cliff top or on a beach, in which case you're looking at a celebrant ceremony. So that's a good starting point as well.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, the so-called boring bit of the guest numbers and the budget, it is essential, because then you can have the fun, like you say, of the experience of trying out the food and different things like that. But it also helps with decision making to a certain point, because if you have got at least a few boundaries or parameters to work within, it does take some of that pressure and that time away.
Definitely, it stops it being, kind of infinite possibilities. You're narrowing it down. Absolutely right.
And at what part of the process do you, as a wedding planner, come in? Does it vary, or
it varies at 2 stages. So generally, it's right at the beginning before they've done anything other than got engaged, which is ideal, really, that they are engaged. And
it's a pretty big hint, though, isn't it? To
Yes.
at the half. I've hired a wedding planner.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably happened. So then you are right at the beginning with them. So you'd be doing the venue hunt. Sometimes, occasionally, I'm hired once they've found the venue. So they've got that and now thought, oh, now what? How do we do this? And then I come in. And it doesn't really make any difference to me at which stage it is. But generally, it is at the very outset.
Yeah. And then you can see it all the way through and take them on that journey and sort of guide them. And do you feel like you have to... we spoke before the podcast of wearing lots of hats as a business owner, but as a wedding planner, do you sometimes have to sort of be there when they're stressed and help them make decisions and sort of sometimes nurse them through things and then be a little bit strict with them, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on personality types, and I think that one of the critical things when hiring a wedding planner, and really perhaps anybody who you're involving in your wedding, is that you get on.
Yeah.
And that's both from my point of view and the client's point of view. Because like I said earlier, it should be a pleasurable process. So they shouldn't be getting stressed if you're doing your job. You will get clients who perhaps are in sort of senior management positions. They're used to micromanaging and that can be a little bit of a struggle where you've got to say, okay, now you delegate.
Yes.
You know, think of me as a member of staff, you're delegating this task to me. And so it's very much, I think, how you set yourself up from the outset.
Yes.
You know, you're not a 24/7 service. That's just a myth. You don't have to be. It's a job. You're doing it within work hours. Certainly before a wedding, you know, a couple of days beforehand, you're more available to them, of course. And yes, there are situations you're going to be privy. You know, as a wedding planner, you're privy to a lot of intimate details and family background.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you know, problem situations, perhaps less than amicable divorces between parents or something who are suddenly going to see each other for the first time after X many years at their daughter or son's wedding. So yes, you're privy to all of that. So a level of discretion is essential. And yes, because you've got that experience, they will talk to you about it. They know it's going no further, but they also know what you're telling them, or what they're telling you rather, you're not hearing for the first time.
No.
You've had this situation before, which is reassuring.
Yeah, and I think couples sometimes forget that, or we forget that for the couples, their wedding is the first and hopefully the only time they're going to have to do this. Whether for us, we do it day in, day out, and it's our job. So yeah, you don't realise how much knowledge and wisdom we impart without realising sometimes.
Exactly, and the experience is just reassuring to them. And the same when you're meeting with your teams, you know, whether you're going to the florist for the sample meeting or meeting with the photographer, and obviously we know each other, and that is very reassuring to them as well, that we're all working as a team on their day.
Definitely.
And a nice feeling for them that they're sort of coming into that fold, and you're all there to give them the best possible day.
Absolutely, and that leads me nicely to another question I was going to ask you about finding suppliers. And do you have a recommended list of suppliers that are your go-to people? How do you balance sort of having go-to suppliers that you know couples can trust and will get value for money, but how do you balance that with sort of being bespoke and giving them choice? Yeah.
So I do, you know, it's not a definitive sort of team as such, but I have a whole variety. So say with stationery, I think it's 9 or 10 different stationers. Photographers, I think there's 10 or 11 on my books. Florists, 4, because there's less sort of diversity. And so I will take them then to who is right for what they want.
Yeah.
Usually do pitch them some choice as well, if I feel they need it, if they're a little bit undecided. But often it's straight to the right person that's doing it. So it's really sort of knowing, just as I mentioned earlier, sort of the different types of stationery, the different styles of photography, as well as the finished product, different cake makers, florist styles, etc. So I have a whole bank, but also you're always discovering new people as well. But you know, as I say, it's not a definitive list.
No, it's being open to new people as well, and not being switched off to say, well, I've got my list of photographers and florists.
And that's who you've got to use.
That's doing them a disservice, isn't it?
Absolutely. And also sometimes the clients they may have a photographer who photographed their sister's wedding or something, and they want to use him or her again, but I've not worked with them. That's fine, of course. You just they become part of the structure of the day.
Yeah, and again, these are questions that a couple should ask their wedding planner when they first meet with them, to check that they're the right match.
Yes.
Really, isn't it? To know
it is, and
how
also
they work.
your portfolio as well will demonstrate the different styles of wedding that you've done. I think to look for the diversity in that as well. And yes, they're not going to point at an old wedding and say, right, that's exactly the one I want, but there's probably going to be elements from each one that excite them, that they think, this is the person that's right for the job.
Yeah, and I think again that seeing that diversity, it gives them insight into how you're going to approach their day, and you've not got those restrictions, and you're not going to sort of just do one type of wedding for them. So it all goes together really nicely from that point of view.
You take your inspiration very much from the clients as well, and obviously every couple is different. So even if you're, today we're at the Landmark Hotel. I've done weddings here before, maybe 4 or 5 over the years, but all of them have been completely different.
Yeah.
So even if you're going back to the same place or using the same florist or the same photographer, whatever, it's still going to be a completely different wedding.
Yeah, fantastic. Is there any, or are there any legal or practical restraints to creating a really personal, bespoke wedding?
No, I mean, do you mean sort of like with ceremonies, that sort of thing?
With ceremonies, or sort of, I mentioned when I wrote my book, very often it's only, if people say no, it might be from a health and safety point of view, like that you can't have that many people in that room, or things like that. But is there anything else that sort of people should think about from a practical or legal point of view?
Not really. I think it's just as you've said there, maximum capacities in a room are just that. There's no squeezing 2 extra people in, that sort of thing. So never to think like that when a venue is telling you that max capacity, that is it. In terms of getting married now, obviously to have a legal ceremony, it's got to be in a licensed premises or a religious premises. That is going to be changing over the next couple of years, where people become, the actual registrar is licensed. It can be anywhere, and they're also looking at perhaps also licensing celebrants. And a celebrant ceremony is a non-legal ceremony, but I think it's I know it is a real burgeoning aspect of our industry, I'd say, particularly over the last 5 years, and there's some fabulous celebrants out there now, and obviously that gives huge choice in terms of where you can get married. Albeit not a legal ceremony, you'd marry beforehand, but to everybody watching it and present at that ceremony, it looks, to all extent purposes, it looks like a legal ceremony, so nobody thinks it's not a real wedding. So that gives a lot more choice, and obviously now the outdoor wedding, that in terms of gazebos and that, can now be registered, so you can have an outdoor wedding per se, and although you're stood under a structure, the guests are sat outside, so that's something that's changed in recent years too. And I'd say the only other thing is, with some venues, particularly if you're hiring museums, you'd be looked to take out, the client has to take out insurance as well, an indemnity insurance, because of the value of what's in that property. But you're talking like £40-50. It's not an expensive thing to do, but the venue will usually the venue will always tell them that. Just for it not to be a surprise.
Like that. Absolutely. Brilliant. So really, from that point of view, if you're meeting with a supplier and they say, oh, that can't be done, or that's not possible, just get a second opinion, I think, because sometimes, again, going back, it's their own restriction, or them not wanting to do it, or them have not experienced it before, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do it yourself. You can be the first to do lots
exactly
of things.
Yes, I mean, I would check it out, but also, on the other hand, perhaps also to bow to expertise as well. If somebody says, we can't do, go off to this park within half an hour and take photos of you or something like that, then, because you as the photographer know the time frame, you know how this works, also if maybe a park ranger is going to come along and say, actually, no, you can't have photographs in here without a license.
It is that balance, and it is, I think we as suppliers have got a responsibility to manage expectations.
Totally.
So when people say, I want this sort of shot, I've allowed 5 minutes, and I said, that's going to take at least 20 minutes to get that shot. It's quite a complex shot, setting wise and technically. we might have to do it a couple of times for it to work, etc., etc. Things like, usually with sparklers and things like that, where it's a lot of variation and other people are involved, and you know, and I had that question, and we did it, and we got the shot, and it was fine. But if the shot hadn't worked out, and I'd gone back and said, well, it's a difficult shot, I couldn't really guarantee it after the event, then that's on
Totally.
me. But by being up front and saying, you can do this, but you might have to take a bit more time from your reception or whatever. So it's listening to expertise.
Totally. And I think the time
together.
thing that you said, Ross, is absolutely right, that they can say, once it gets dark, we want to go out and have these photos taken, and actually that's going to be halfway through their meal or just as the dancing's starting. You know they're not going to want to leave their party at that point. So again, it's saying, yes, I will ask you, by all means we can plan to do it. But if you're having a good time and say no, then you're not getting that shot.
That's exactly what I say to people when they say like they want a sunset shot. And I say that's fine, but that's sunsets at this time on your wedding day. If you're happy to be pulled away from your guests or the dance floor, fine. If not, then you've made that decision, and so it is that balance because the day goes so quickly, doesn't it? Really quickly.
Gosh, absolutely.
Flies by.
Yeah.
So time is a precious commodity on you.
It
all
is.
the time, but especially on your wedding day.
It is. It's got to be very carefully structured, but not to seem so. Yeah.
Exactly. Fantastic. Well, you've shared so much knowledge and wisdom, and I've learnt a lot from chatting to you. So I really appreciate you being part of the podcast today. Just before we sign off, tell everyone where they can get in touch.
Sure, they can find my website, which is siobhancravenrobins.co.uk, and then the National Association of Wedding Professionals, we have a website, nawp-uk.com, and the Event School London, also just Google that and you can see the various courses there. Thanks so much for today, Ross. I've really enjoyed it.
No, thank you, and hopefully we'll chat again soon. Take care.
Thanks.